This view was worth a hike.
Right? And it's a good way to stay on top of my health.
Yes, I'm Cologuard, a prescription colon cancer screening option for people 45 plus at average risk. Have you screened for colon cancer?
Not yet.
Don't wait. It's more treatable when caught in early stages.
Tell me more.
Cologuard is non-invasive and it's used at home. It detects altered DNA in your stool to find 92% of colon cancers.
92%?
Yep, even those in early stages.
This was seen in a clinical study with patients 50 and older. Any positive result should be followed by a diagnostic colonoscopy. False positive and negative results may occur. Cologuard is not a replacement for colonoscopy in high-risk patients. Do not use if you have had adenomas, have inflammatory bowel disease and certain hereditary syndromes, or a personal or family history of colon cancer.
Most insured patients pay $0. Ask your provider or an online prescriber if Cologuard is right for you, or visit Cologuard.com.
I'm in.
I'm Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the What Fulfills You podcast. My name is Emily Elizabeth, and I am your host. Today's episode is another solo episode. I know I did one a few days ago over the weekend as a bonus, but this one is actually pulled from the vault, aka it is a throwback episode, and this one specifically came out last year. And the reason why I wanted to bring it back is because A, it was actually a highly downloaded episode last year, and B, I feel like this topic of adapting to change, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, especially for you guys who are listening. I know a lot of you are either in college or out of college, and per all of us, we are just figuring life out as we go. And so I personally felt like this topic would be helpful to bring back again, especially if you need a little, push or whatever that may be, a sense of motivation. And I will admit, I think this is something that I have a lot of experience in because I moved cross country at the age of 18. I went to 2 different universities. I moved from Orange County to Los Angeles to New York City, which I did bring up in this episode. And I just have had a lot of personal adversity and kind of just had no choice but to learn how to adapt and be okay with major change, especially in my physical environment and different elements of life that tend to be like the bigger parts. So that includes the career aspect as well. So I certainly hope this can be helpful or can, for me, whenever I listen to a topic that is pertaining to something I really need to listen to during that chapter, it helps me get the wheels turning. It helps me kind of get outside of myself and think of other people that have done it and how, if they can do it, I can do it as well, and how I can tap into that mindset. So this episode was actually released exactly a year ago, or I don't know to the date, but it was released at the end of November last year. And I know it's kind of hard to go back to old episodes to listen, especially, even if they were helpful, sometimes it's just like easier to listen to the newer episodes. So that's why I did want to bring this back, because I know this was valuable for those of you who had a chance to listen to this last year. So nonetheless, hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. I guess I will start just by sharing some of the major changes I've gone through in my life so you guys can kind of see from my perspective what I'm speaking from. So the biggest one for me was when I was 18. I moved from a very small town in Pennsylvania with 8,000 people, and I've shared this before, but a little fun fact about, I guess, like my hometown, or like the outskirts of my hometown county, is that I grew up in Taylor Swift's hometown. So if you're really curious, you can Google that. But I grew up in just a really small area, and I came from what is known as like a rural area, even though some people like to think it's suburbs, like definitely not at all. Like my specific part of town was in between 2 different counties in Pennsylvania that were much bigger, but I grew up literally right dab in the middle of the 2. And so for lack of better words, I grew up in bumblefuck. But I do genuinely appreciate that because I know without growing up in that kind of environment, I would not have appreciated and loved my, I guess you could say, life journey along the way with where I've lived. And I consider kind of the moving aspect to be typically the biggest change for many of us, moving physical environments. So I came from a rural town, and mind you, my backyard, my view from my bedroom window, no joke, was a large cornfield. And then from afar, you could see the passing highway. And I know in California, I call it a freeway, but back in my hometown, we call it highways. And it was like a 2-way or 2-lane highway. And when I moved to California, it became more like 4 or 5 lanes. So, a lot of things I had to adapt to. But I started from there when I was 18. I moved to Orange County / Newport Beach, California, for college. And I definitely really wanted this. So that's like a big starting point, is you have to have that desire to leave your comfort zone. And it's definitely a benefit if you are changing physical environments where you're going, for school, or there's a bigger backbone reason as to why you're going. I guess not like random like me when, speaking about my move from LA to New York, it was not necessarily like I had to move, but it was just a pure personal decision, which I will dive into. But if you ever have to move somewhere because of school or anything of that nature, I highly recommend to take it, because it's going to be a lot easier in terms of the transition. Because if you're in grad school, or you're younger right now and you are listening to my podcast and you're 18 or 19 and you're going to go to school, or you're thinking about applying to college, whatever, I definitely think going from that stage, from high school to college, is the best time to try that transition, because you have nothing to lose. And I think we are more in that kid-like way of thinking and curiosity compared to when we are 22, 23, 24, where we get more into that adulthood life. Although I like to think I'm still very young, and I definitely am, but I understand how when you get closer to that age, depending on your upbringing, your cultural background, your parents, and just the values you have, some people feel more pressured to stay still and not move by the time they're in their mid-20s, which I personally wouldn't choose that for myself, but I completely understand, because again, I grew up in a rural town where plenty of my friends now, or at least like some people I grew up with from middle school and elementary school, are actually now married and or might already have their first kid. And again, everyone's around 24 years old. So to each their own, but definitely recommend, if you ever have an opportunity to move for a reason that's kind of bigger than just like I feel like moving, then definitely take it, because it's harder to come across those opportunities where you're semi-forced to move, like going to grad school of some sort. Another major change I took note of that I feel like is really important to share is when I transferred from UC Irvine to Chapman University, and both colleges were in Orange County, California. So again, this is for those of you who have never been to California or are not familiar with kind of the map or layout of California. Orange County is in Southern California between Los Angeles and San Diego. So it's about an hour drive from San Diego and a 45-minute drive to Los Angeles, let's say towards like a little bit above LAX. So I just remember when I used to live in Marina del Rey, Venice area, it was about a 45-minute drive for me to go and hang out in Newport Beach / Irvine. And I speak about this transfer experience because I actually almost didn't transfer for many common reasons that most of us would most likely not want to take on the challenge of adapting to a new physical environment. And, the biggest one is the fear of the unknown. It's like, what's gonna be like, how am I gonna make new friends? And am I gonna even like it? And all of those questions we ask ourselves when we're trying to talk ourselves out of doing something that seems scary in the moment, but objectively, it's actually not that bad. And other dumb stuff that I do want to share too, because I think it's really important, because I've been there in the position of almost making a decision like not transferring, which I'm utterly grateful that I did, but I almost didn't for a very lame reason, and I'm about to share it. But basically, I was almost named the sweetheart of a fraternity back at UC Irvine. And, at the age of, I guess I was 20 years old at that time, or 19, maybe 19, just turned 20. Obviously, I am not thinking bigger picture, but I remember being weirdly just emotionally attached to this idea of being the sweetheart of this fraternity. And this was actually someone I was dating during all of college. He was part of this fraternity, but he was also graduating that same year that I was about to transfer. So he graduated spring semester, and then by the end of that spring semester would be my last semester at UC Irvine, and then come fall I'd be transferring to Chapman. I had this, I would consider personally, an emotionally toxic attachment to this idea of being a fraternity sweetheart and then just staying here because it was comfortable. And I remember that moment during that summer where I almost pulled out of going to Chapman. I was like, I don't know, is this the right move? I knew academically it was great for me, and even tuition wise, actually, even though UC Irvine is a public school and Chapman is a private university, Chapman ended up being a little bit better financially for myself and my family, just because I actually had a scholarship there when I applied based on my GPA transferring over. And I remember that semester I worked very hard because I knew there was a good chance that I was going to consider transferring. So I would rather put myself in a position to, look good academically going in, and then also be able to get some scholarship. And so as an out-of-state student in a state school like UC Irvine, out-of-state tuition was more expensive. And so it just made logistically more sense in many aspects, but emotionally, obviously, it didn't. But now in hindsight, I'm glad I did. And, I think this is, again, a similar situation many of you guys might be in at some point in your life, where you are emotionally attached to an idea of something happening or of something becoming, the what if this happens if you stay. But logically or logistically, it's actually better for you to move on or transfer or whatever that similar parallel situation could be for you, right? So for me, looking back now, I'm extremely glad that I transferred, not only because I obviously met new friends, some of which have been on this show, but what I value most in the friendships that I made was that I finally found people that were much more aligned to me, not only energetically, but the values that most of my friends I met through at Chapman, the values that they had just aligned with me a lot more. They had a different type of vision they wanted in life, and just their ideology, their philosophy in how they handle situations, the way they make decisions. It made me grow as well. I feel like, to be fully transparent, when I was at UC Irvine, I would never take it back on going there. I actually enjoyed my experience very much there for the 2 years I had. And if I had to go back and do my college experience again, I would genuinely choose the exact same route, because I do not believe I could appreciate Chapman the way I did without having experienced what I experienced at UCI first. And so even though that experience was toxic in some ways in regards to the people I met there and some of the people I was friends with there, I don't know what it was. I'm not saying it's because of the school. I just think certain people that I came across there, now looking back years later from a more objective lens, there was just a lot of people that were unhealthy for me personally, and just had a lot of traits that brought out even more toxic traits from me. And so that's why I came into Chapman realizing that I needed to reset myself, because I was already calling myself out on my bullshit. I knew that I just wasn't a person that I looked up to. I always asked myself the question of, would your 10-year-old self look up to who you are today? And I think that hits home, because we all remember when we were 6 years old, 7, 8, 9, there was always that person, whether it was a pop star or someone we saw on TV, we looked up to them, right? And there was something about them that just made us want to be more like them. And so I think about that for myself too. When I'm making decisions, when I'm living my life, am I living the way I would have looked up to myself at the age of 10? And I couldn't say that about myself based on the person that I was when I left UCI. But when I came to Chapman, especially with the people I started to surround myself with more, I became a lot better. But then also too, I came in with a very specific goal about the type of friends I would allow myself to be friends with. And I've mentioned this in past episodes before, but I think it's so important to be very specific about who you choose to be friends with, because that becomes who you are. You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with most. I know that quote is repeated very often, but I'm a firm believer in that. And I tell one of my good friends as well, who struggles with finding friends that are aligned with her, I tell her that you have to be super specific, which seems really corny, but we're so specific about our romantic partner. So why shouldn't we be just as specific with our girlfriends, who are going to be there, quite frankly, more through thick and thin than some of the relationships romantically that we will go through in our teens, in our 20s, because we just don't know what's going to happen, right? Sometimes they work out, sometimes it falls through. And so we want our girlfriends or our friendships, whoever, to be a strong backbone and strong foundation for us to have within our relationships and our community, our circle. And I think you just can't find that unless you are specific about your values and the type of values your friends / future friends also live by. And then other reasons why I am just so grateful that I did make this transition was because academics were much better. I studied a subject I enjoyed more. So back at UC Irvine, I was a business economics major and I liked it, but it was very black and white. And of course, I'm sure I would have ended up at very similar corporate jobs or similar, positions I'm in now. But I realized, especially because I was, lucky enough to have my parents help me pay for school, that I should be enjoying what we're paying for me to go to school for, right? Like I should want to go to class every day. And I don't understand the mindset of going to class and dreading it, right? Like if you dread it, then get out. Like, and especially if your parents are paying for school, or even if you're putting yourself through school, then you're wasting your time and money if you're not enjoying it. And that's something I strongly believe in, is that, if you go to school, you should enjoy what you study, because you will find a way to utilize that degree at some point in your life. And as a tangent, actually, I had Bridget Taylor on, I think 2 months ago. She's the founder of Harridan Vodka, and she studied medieval history, I believe, at Dartmouth College. And even though that doesn't really apply to what she does today, she's actually a consultant while also running her startup Harridan Vodka business. So obviously that doesn't, like most people who are in consulting studied business or maybe finance or something of that nature in undergrad. But for her, even though she doesn't use that degree in her current job, she actually ended up using what she's learned in medieval history to brand her vodka business and her vodka company. And we talked about it on that episode in that quote I love from Steve Jobs, something along the lines of, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you just have to trust whatever it is, whether it's the universe, karma, God, whatever, that when you look back, the dots will connect. And I believe he said this at the Stanford commencement back in like 2004 or something, but I saw that quote in his biography that I read partially last year, and I still need to finish the book, but it just really resonates with me. So moral of the story, don't waste money on school if you don't enjoy it and if you aren't intentionally trying to apply yourself. And so I studied business economics at UCI, but when I transferred, I switched my major into studying strategic and corporate communication, which is essentially, for layman's terms, it's like half business and half communication, because I did have to take business classes. And then I also minored in entrepreneurship, where I took accounting and more business-focused classes. But it was very innovative. The approach to learning at this school was so innovative, and I think it's such an underrated school. So I'm so grateful for having that experience and, attending Chapman. But then other aspects of myself too, on a more personal level, I look back and notice that I became more gritty and independent, which led to, my life today in terms of how I do things and how I moved to New York. And then because I came into the school and just the experience with no one to hold my hand type thing, I had to face obstacles head on, both mentally, emotionally, and then also just physically in terms of going to class and making new friends and all of that. And I think that is such a great skill set for adulthood, which probably is a big one that has parlayed over into my life today as well in my early mid-20s. And so moral of that story is just anytime you are scared, like I was back in the day, to make a transition, to transfer, whatever, you'll realize later on that there are many lessons to take away from it. And even though in those moments, whether it's that year or the first couple of years, even though you'll feel a lot of pain and struggle, I have always believed that success can only come from adversity. And I've heard many others say that themselves, those who have been successful in their career, in their life, in their relationships, whatever. I think in order to feel that kind of fulfillment and success in whatever you're looking for, you have to go through the rough roads and the rough adversity. And I say it all the time, I genuinely kind of wish adversity on people my age and younger, because the earlier you face it and the earlier you have to figure out how to adapt and maneuver that part of life, the sooner you'll get that skill set and the more prepared you will be in later on in life. And, again, I was hit with a lot mentally and personally in my early 20s, but I realized that a lot of people kind of get hit with that maybe in their mid to late 20s, which is what they call that mid-20s, late 20s crisis. Sometimes people are like, fuck, I'm not married yet, or, I'm not engaged yet, or I don't like my job, I don't like my career. And everyone gets in that mental rut at some point. And I definitely hit that big time in my early 20s. Not the greatest experience, but also learned a lot from it. So I'm just saying, when you have that option, just go through it. And a book that I would recommend that helped me through that time, through that rough time, is called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. He also wrote The Daily Stoic, and this book is also based off of Stoic philosophy. And it just made me realize, in order to get through to the other side of, the pot of gold or the happiness or feeling better about whatever in life, the only way to get there is to go through the hard path. There is no shortcut in life, and we all go through adversity. Just some of us choose to talk about it and speak about what we learn, and some of us choose to hide it. And I think either way is fine. I just, I've been through a lot of adversity myself, and I can assure you guys that I genuinely believe that is the only path to get to where you want to be. As a show that focuses on mindful living and designing a fulfilled life, you know that a big part of that is from my physical health and how I take care of myself. So recently I decided to try some new wellness supplements from Happy Healthy Hippie, because they make a line of intentionally crafted earth-grown herbal supplements to help support your whole self. So for me specifically, I tried the Joy-Filled supplements because this is meant to help you manage your anxieties and sustain better energy levels, and of course manage stress a bit better. And what I love about it is that it is actually all natural ingredients, and I've been very intrigued by herbs. So they have a whole list of them, and like leaf extract, all of that good stuff. You can definitely check out the detailed info. But for me personally, I've been trying to increase my intake on more natural ingredients such as herbs. So if you are curious to give this a try, I definitely recommend going to check it out on their website. And especially this time of year, it is a great time to support your wellness routine with natural, effective, and simple supplements. And the best part, they are based in San Diego, sunny California, where I used to live. And so you can get 50% off your first subscription and free shipping at happyhealthyhippie.com/whatfulfillsyou. Again, that's 50% off your first subscription when you visit happyhealthyhippie.com/whatfulfillsyou. So, as a former athlete and someone that works out nearly every day, you guys, I feel like I'm always trying to find a way to detox and especially help my muscles recover besides my usual stretching. So recently I decided to try the higher dose infrared sauna blanket. And oh my gosh, this is literally a game changer. Not only is it portable and you can bring it anywhere, all you have to do is you just lay down inside the blanket, you turn up the heat, and you just sweat it out. It pretty much has all the benefits of a large, expensive sauna, but less money and less space. Seriously, all you have to do is you just plug the blanket in, and you can either lay on your bed, you can lay out on your couch, and from there you just get sweating. For me, I noticed that it really did help me with muscle recovery, so I'm usually doing strength training 2 to 3 times a week, so I always need that besides my usual stretching. And it also helped with detoxing and boosting circulation. If you are interested, you can get your own today at higherdose.com. Use the promo code WhatFulfillsYou at checkout to save 15% off. That's higherdose.com with the promo code WhatFulfillsYou. Or you can just go to higherdose.com/WhatFulfillsYou to save 15% off.
This view was worth a hike.
Right? And it's a good way to stay on top of my health.
Yes, I'm Cologuard, a prescription colon cancer screening option for people 45 plus at average risk. Have you screened for colon cancer?
Not yet.
Don't wait. It's more treatable when caught in early stages.
Tell me more.
Cologuard is non-invasive and it's used at home. It detects altered DNA in your stool to find 92% of colon cancers.
92%?
Yep, even those in early stages.
This was seen in a clinical study with patients 50 and older. Any positive result should be followed by a diagnostic colonoscopy. False positive and negative results may occur. Cologuard is not a replacement for colonoscopy in high-risk patients. Do not use if you have had adenomas, have inflammatory bowel disease and certain hereditary syndromes, or a personal or family history of colon cancer.
Most insured patients pay $0. Ask your provider or an online prescriber if Cologuard is right for you, or visit Cologuard.com.
I'm in.
And then I also want to dive into more recent changes I've had in the past year. And so, again, also dealing with changing physical environments, which, I guess, I don't know what it sounds like, if you guys are listening to this, but trust me when I say it has always been hard for me as well. Maybe I have the guts to just pull it off and just go and follow through with it. But I will say, too, the more you do it, like my friend Avery had mentioned in her guest episode on this podcast, she's moved, I think, 3 or 4 times now since college, and I have moved 2 or 3 times since college, or I guess 2 times. 2 times in terms of physical cities. I've moved to 2 different cities since college, and I guess as you do it more frequently, you get used to it, and it's less scary. And so my first major change was moving from Newport Beach to Los Angeles. And I remember I had a lot of struggle with this because I had a family member that just was not a fan of me moving here. They were actually really against it. And I know that even my other family member was skeptical, wasn't as against it, but just was like, if you have a plan, if you think it's going to work out, then, go ahead and do it. And so I definitely never had that kind of emotional support from parents or family members when making decisions that I felt like was best for me. That also includes going to college, also the transferring aspect. So shout out to you guys who also are kind of in the same boat with lack of emotional support, because I'm here with you guys. But when it came to that moving, I was scared initially to move to LA, even though it's like, fuck, like moving from Orange County to Los Angeles is nothing. It's only 45 minutes, but it's still a completely different environment. You know, I had to find a new workout studio, Pilates studio, and find new coffee shops to go work at, you know, and it's still uncomfortable at first, even though I've driven there so many times to visit and hang out for the day, but it's different when you live there, you know? So I definitely had to get used to it because living in Orange County was a lot more clean, especially Newport. Just things are slower paced, it's cleaner. It's definitely more of like a luxury suburb area. You know, I'm pretty sure like Newport Beach is one of the top 10 richest zip codes in the US. So, you know, it's different when you go to college there and then you move to LA, which is a little bit more grungy and eclectic, but I ended up loving it. And I remember telling myself, you know, not only did I wish I moved there a year sooner, although again, I can't say I would have had the same experience because COVID happened, and I loved meeting my coworkers in Orange County where I worked at corporate. But I will say, you know, when I was going through the pros and cons and deciding, you know, if I would move to LA or not, which I decided on a whim within 1 month, I thought about moving. Then I went to look at apartments for fun, both online and then in person. And then I was like, you know what? I'm doing it. I'm moving to LA. Again, had no reason to. I was still working my corporate job with the headquarters or just like the office being in Orange County, but we were going to be remote. So it really didn't matter. But I told myself, the worst case scenario truly was I could just move back to Orange County, and I always can drive. It's a 45-minute drive, which in California terms is nothing because traffic in itself, sometimes you'll drive 3 miles and it'll take you 45 minutes. So driving from LA to OC was always really easy. And of course, I ended up loving it. And the family member that wasn't that supportive, you know, was quiet and realized I loved it, but you know, would never acknowledge that they were wrong, that kind of thing. And I've grown to just be like, okay, that's totally fine. But I'm genuinely so glad that I moved to LA because I met my friend Elia, also been on the show, and my other entrepreneurial friends. And so that was a great experience. But then my most recent one was moving from New York to LA. And a while back, this was pre-COVID, I want to say like February or January 2020, I was talking to my girlfriend Dana, and I was telling her, you know, I'm thinking about moving to New York or even DC because at the time I wasn't sure if New York was too big for me. And it's funny, like, you know, where I'm at now. But I was like definitely hesitant because I'm like, what am I going to do with my car? And like all these different scenarios I was throwing that are practical, but honestly not that big of an obstacle. And I remember her telling me this. I was sitting in my car. It was a rainy day. And she was like, Emily, you know, worst case scenario, it comes down to money, right? You know, if it's like you can just always move back, and yeah, it's gonna cost money, but you're gonna be fine, you know? And and my friend Avery said the same thing too. When I was hesitant to move and make major changes, she always told me that I think it was one of her grandparents or someone older who's also wiser had told her, you know, if the problem is around money, it can be solved. And that just always hit me because I've realized that is true if you just kind of pause and think about it for a second, in terms of some of the things that stop us from doing what we want to do sometimes involves money, or we make it all about money, and then therefore we just tell ourselves, oh, we can't do it because it's too expensive, or it's going to cost this and this. But I also know that if you really want something, if you want something bad enough, you will find a way to make it happen. And so same thing, I told myself, worst case scenario, if I really don't like New York, I can always move back to LA. Yes, will it cost money? But just knowing that I can find a way to come back and I don't have to live through that physical environment. If I hate it that much, I can always come back, right? And so I encourage you guys all to like kind of ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario? Like, what can you do? Can you go back to your original environment? Can you, find an alternative that's even better? That kind of thing. I always encourage everyone to, evaluate your pros and cons, best case scenario, worst case scenario. And then, just also to my mindset about changing environments and leaving comfort zones. I would rather I would rather be able to say that I did something and, it didn't work out or I didn't like it than always wonder, what if I moved there? Or what if I lived there for 6 months? Or what if I lived there for a year, right? And again, this typically I would say only applies if it's something you're on the fence about and you're leaning towards wanting to do. Whereas for example, back in college, pre-college, I should say, I had the opportunity to study in London for a year and then go to USC, University of Southern California, for 3 years. And my mom to this day still nags, I wouldn't say to this day, but up until maybe the past year, so meaning after over a year of me graduating college, she would still say, oh, like, you should have still gone there, or you would have regretted it. Like, you regret not going, don't you? And honestly, I don't, because in that situation, I didn't want to go as bad, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't want it enough. And so I chose my own route, which was going to UC Irvine and then ultimately transferring to Chapman, which I am grateful for that path. I think that was much more aligned for me. But again, I don't have a what if scenario about, oh, what if I went to London? Because I didn't really actually want that path as much. Because I think for most of us, I can speak for myself, if you want something enough, right, you'll end up most likely finding a way to get towards that. Because it will just always kind of live in the back of your mind. You're always going to go, what if? Like, what if I sent that text? Or what if I just went out that night? Or what if I didn't do this? Or what if I moved there, right? Like, you always are going to think about that. And I never really thought about, oh, what if London and USC and all that? Sometimes you just have to do what's best for you and not what your parents think is best for you. Although, again, always maintain respect for your parents, of course. I'm not saying disrespect them, but just also understand that when you're in your 20s and once you're 18 and up and going to college and figuring out your life, you are an adult and your parents are meant to help guide you towards the best. But at the end of the day, you know yourself the best. And no matter what people say, no matter what people tell you, you are the only person that knows the best next step for you to take. And I used to have doubts in that. And then once I started to make my own decisions and made my own mistakes, made my own successes, whatever, then I realized, like, wow, I really do know what's best for myself and I can make these decisions. And the more you do it, the more consistent you get. And then the more confident you will get as well in terms of making these life-changing decisions, so to speak. And then the last thing I want to touch on, because I know this one is always brought up, is how to make new friends in new environments. Again, especially if you're not going to a new city or new town because you're going to grad school or got a new job where you already have kind of an open window of opportunity to meet new people. My best advice is, number one, go in with the mindset that you are open to meeting new people. I think it's very difficult to meet people if you are closed off and you're not putting yourself out there, no matter if you are an extrovert or introvert. You just have to do this. That's part of being uncomfortable. And I'm not totally like the biggest social butterfly, but I definitely, if I need or want to find new people to bring into my life, I will open up that space energetically, and that definitely attracts more people and new people into my life. But with that being said, though, kind of like I said earlier, you have to be specific about what you're looking for. A mistake that I see many people around my age that they make is that they are sometimes maybe too open to allowing different types of people into their life. And I think that kind of makes the window almost too open or too broad. And actually, a great friend of mine, she called me last night kind of to vent about a situation with a, I guess, semi-new friend, so to speak. She's probably more of like a newer surface level friend as of now. But she, was saying how this person ended up ditching her. They made plans to watch the football game at the bar or whatever at the restaurant, and then some guy that she had met yesterday invited her to go on a party bus, and then that friend went, and my friend was upset and that kind of situation, because she's like, wow, I'm so surprised that someone would, just ditch me for someone they just met and just for a party bus on a Sunday. And more of the story of that is I was telling her, and what I would tell you guys too, is that take note of those moments, right? And ask yourself, is this how I want to be treated? And if the answer is no, which I would advise most of you should be saying no, I would never want to be treated like that because that's disrespectful. Make a list of your values and make note of seeing people, or I guess you could say potential friends, see if they kind of uphold those values that you have in their day-to-day actions. And I think those are very easy to take notice of if you actually just mindfully stay curious about it, because I think so many of those conflicts about surface level friends or not having people that really get you, it happens when you keep opening the door for people that just don't belong in your life, and maybe you're too good for them, so to speak, on a moral level, because hey, I personally wouldn't ditch a friend of mine, regardless if they're a new friend or a friend I've had for years. I wouldn't ditch them for a guy that I just met to go on a party bus on a Sunday when I have work the next morning and go, 45 minutes south to, just pretty much drink and have fun. And again, just for me personally, I wouldn't do that because, that speaks levels on how I am as a person, meaning I don't have respect for myself and holding standards of who I spend time with, but also shows that I don't value my potential friendship with the person that I'm leaving. And so, if someone did that to me, and I would encourage this for everyone, if someone does that ever does that to you, just take note of it and make sure you keep your distance, because if you keep coming back to people that disrespect you or don't seem to value you, it will show to them that you're okay with being treated like that. So I guess kind of circling back on being specific, be specific about the type of friend or friends you want to be surrounded by more. And that's how, truly, I can honestly say, that's how I've gotten all my friends I have today. And I've talked about it in the past. I've had 0 friends before transferring into Chapman. I didn't have anyone going into that school. Came out with a lot better friendships than I had at my previous university. And then also it led into my post-grad life of the type of friends, the type of people I'd attract, because as well, when you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with, they are also the average of the 5 people they surround themselves with most. And so my belief is that you're more likely to bump into more like-minded people based on those initial, those initial connections, right? So the secondary and third connections coming from the people you already know, they're more likely to have some common ground or common interests. And so that's why I think it's so important to be very specific about those first connections, because those can later lead on to, introductions to, maybe romantic partners or mutual friends, and you kind of get the gist. And so if you're too open, you're going to start to lead different, or I guess you could say inaccurate, wrong people into your life that are not actually aligned with you. So that was all for today's episode on how to adapt to major change and leave your comfort zone. I guess my best and final tip here is to just be open-minded about leaving your physical environment and your comfort zone. I understand how hard it is. I grew up in a town where most people never leave. But if it's something you want for yourself, which I would assume most likely if you're listening to this, or at least you're curious about it, just ask yourself, would you want to live with regret later on, 10, 15 years from now, wishing that you tried something? And if you don't believe me, just ask elders, right? People who are much older than us. I'm talking like not even our parents, but even older than them. They will not tell you the things that they did, but they will tell you the things that they wish they did. And that hits home for me because we're all young right now. We have the opportunity to maximize our life in the best way possible without as much on the line, so to speak. So that's in regards to family, kids, finances, all of that. We have a lot more to, I guess, take risk with. And so if you are in that position, I highly recommend it. the worst case scenario, if you don't like the city you moved to or you feel so uncomfortable you can't bear it for another 3 to 6 months, you can always go back to where you started, and that's okay. So just remember, it's not life or death. And most likely you're going to actually have a great experience out of it, and you're going to learn a lot more about yourself and realize that taking the leap and jumping into your uncomfortable zone and into whatever is the unknown that ends up always being better than you realized. Thanks again for tuning in this week. And before you head out, if you haven't checked out the What Fulfills You card game or daily gratitude journal, it's available on the official website at whatfulfillsyou.com. You can enjoy 10% off because you are a listener. That code is not shared anywhere else. It's only shared on each podcast episode. So 10% off with the code whatfulfillsyou10 at checkout, and you can gift this to a colleague, a friend, or grab it for yourself during the holiday season. Thanks again, and I will talk with you all next time.
This view was worth a hike.
Right? And it's a good way to stay on top of my health.
Yes, I'm Cologuard, a prescription colon cancer screening option for people 45 plus at average risk. Have you screened for colon cancer?
Not yet.
Don't wait. It's more treatable when caught in early stages.
Tell me more.
Cologuard is non-invasive and it's used at home. It detects altered DNA in your stool to find 92% of colon cancers.
92%?
Yup, even those in early stages.
This was seen in a clinical study with patients 50 and older. Any positive result should be followed by a diagnostic colonoscopy. False positive and negative results may occur. Cologuard is not a replacement for colonoscopy in high-risk patients. Do not use if you have had adenomas, have inflammatory bowel disease and certain hereditary syndromes, or a personal or family history of colon cancer.
Most insured patients pay $0. Ask your provider or an online prescriber if Cologuard is right for you, or visit Cologuard.com.
I'm in.
Hi, I've got a prescription for diabetes test strips. How much is the copay?
That could take me a while to calculate. In the meantime, you should think about over-the-counter Contour Next test strips. You get 35 for $19.99, and they're highly accurate. For full details, visit contournext.com/radio.